Hey golfers, Dave from Fit2U Golf. Today I'm going to walk you through a gap testing. If you watched my last video, you know that I changed the shafts in my TE forged irons, and that's a good time to do a gap testing to make sure that the gaps between your clubs in terms of yardages are just where you want them. There are a couple other times when you should do this. Getting new clubs or new components is one time where you want to do gap testing. If you've noticed decreases or increases in your distance, particularly between clubs, that's a good time to do it. Or if you've made some swing changes. Now, I usually check my loft and lies twice a year. I hadn't checked them on this since the middle of last season, so I'd played some golf and hit them off some mats in the off season, and so I just went out and did the gap testing as is. I didn't try to reset them or readjust them. So here are some swings of me at the range collecting the data, and I used my Mevo to collect the data on this. So right after I got back from the range, I measured the loft of each club to see where it was, and so I would know which way to adjust if I had to, based on the numbers. So here you go. Starting at the top of the bag, the 5-iron was at 26 degrees aloft, and I was getting a carry of 165. The 6-iron was 29 degrees aloft, and I was getting a carry of 158. The 7-iron was 34.5 degrees of loft, and I was getting a carry of 150. The 8-iron was 37 degrees of loft, and a carry of 136. The 9-iron was 42 degrees aloft, carrying 124, and the pitching wedge at 46 degrees was carrying 111. So based on this, I have some gaps that I need to address. I want to reduce the gap between the pitching wedge and the 9-iron. I want to reduce the gap between the 8 and the 7, and I want to increase the gap between the 6 and the 5. So my goal here is to strengthen the loft of the 5-iron and weaken the loft of the other clubs except for the 6 and the pitching wedge, to try and get the optimal, say, 12 yards of gap yardage in between each club. Ideally, what I'd want to see is keep the pitching wedge at that 110, 111 range, but then try to go 12 yards up from there, eventually ending up with around a 169, 170 carry with the 5-iron. Incidentally, I should add that while I was doing this test, I was also watching the ball flight, so I knew if I needed to adjust my lie angles at all. And as a rule of thumb, I typically will have my 5 and 6-iron bent a little bit upright, because I tend to push those clubs to the right, and then the 9 and pitching wedge I tend to bend a degree or two flat. So if you haven't had a gap test or had one recently, maybe this is something you want to do. If you have a portable launch monitor, you can gather the data yourself and then go to someone, club maker, who's got a bending machine and have them adjusted, or you can go to them directly and they'll help collect the data and figure out where your gaps need to be. But this is one of those really kind of cheap things that you can do to improve your game. All of us should know our numbers. So let me know what you think, post some comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Get out there, get a gap test, and stay positive.